On this channel, we focus on helping you help kids with math. But we're also huge college football fans. And lately there's been some confusion and controversy involving our favorite college football show, The Late Kick with Josh Pate. Let me pause for a second while I take a quick sip of the CHALICE of Supremacy. On this show, they use something called the JP pool. And this is where a lot of confusion has stemmed from. The reason is this show focuses on using ratings and not rankings. All right, so both of these are important, but what's the difference between rankings and ratings? If we're talking about rankings, we're talking something that's like a personal opinion or an order of preference. These are the teams that you think are better. It's not based on like a mathematical calculation or a formula, but it's sort of based on merit based. So what have you seen on the field? Has this team beat that team? And just kind of like what does the old eyeball test show us? So here's an example of something that might be a ranking. Let's say I want to rank my top 3 Adam Sandler movies. Well, number 1 for me is Happy Gilmore. Number 2 is going to be Billy Madison. And of course, number 3 would be The Waterboy. I did not use any math there. It's just kind of my own personal opinion. Now with ratings, when we're talking about ratings, we're talking about a lot of math. We're talking about probability. We're talking about stuff that's data driven. And we're also, for example, if we're talking about the Late Kick show, they use a computer model. So we're talking about a lot of math here. So here's an example where you've probably seen this before. If you go to Amazon, they use ratings and they rate different products. For example, like this Nike football. Even your favorite Late Kick show is going to have a rating. So let's look at college football season last year. We're going to look at 2 examples from last football season of rankings versus ratings. Our first one is Oregon versus Washington. Now, the computer model from the show said that Oregon was rated higher. So even though we don't know the exact numbers, let's say there's a 60% chance that Oregon should win a game. So 6 out of every 10 games, Oregon would win. Well, that means then Washington would win the other 40%, or they would win 4 out of every 10 games. So what actually happened when they played? Well, Washington actually won the game in a very good game during the regular season by 3. Now, when the Associated Poll came out, which did their rankings, just like you'd expect, the University of Washington was ranked ahead of Oregon. Washington was 3rd in the AP poll. Oregon was ranked 5th. But when the JP did their ratings, and they're ranking the strength of teams, Oregon was still rated ahead of them. Oregon was rated 2nd, and Washington wasn't just 3rd, they were all the way down at 12th. And this is right before the conference championship. So what did the Vegas odds makers think? Well, they agreed with the JP poll, and they considered Oregon a 9.5 point favorite to win the championship game. Why would both the JP poll and Vegas believe that Oregon should win this game and fairly handily? Well, they played 7 common opponents during the season. And Oregon, 6 of the 7 times, beat those teams much more decisively than Washington did. The only time Washington had a greater margin of victory was the victory over USC, and it was only by 1 more point than what Oregon did. If you look at their average margin of victory with these 7 opponents, the Oregon Ducks were nearly triple that of Washington. Even the opponents they played that were not common, the Washington game was very close, and Oregon won by a substantial landslide. Yet when they played in the championship game, Washington won again. So if we revisit our model, you can see that we said Oregon would have like a 60% chance, Washington would have a 40% chance. But they played twice. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that information and we're going to create a little grid showing a simulation of 100 games. And it shows our 2 games right here. Now, if you look in green, this green area, that would represent the chances of Oregon winning both games, which is 36%. The purple would represent the chances of Washington winning 2 games. That would be 16%. And there was a 48% chance that it would split. So when we're looking at what actually happened here, Washington had a 16% chance to win both games, which is a 1 out of 6 chance. But it means Oregon had an 84% chance of winning that next game. So what happened? Either the computer model was wrong, or this was just one of those random 16% of the time that Washington would actually win both games. Even though Oregon lost both games, it's still possible the model was correct. Washington should win both games at least 1/6 of the time. This might have been one of those 1/6. Our next example was when New Mexico State went to visit Auburn last year. Auburn would have been a much higher rated team than New Mexico State. Auburn would have probably been expected to win 99 of 100 times versus New Mexico State. Vegas was predicting Auburn to win by at least 25 points, which is nearly 4 touchdowns. New Mexico State had never beat Auburn or anybody from the SEC. But for this one day, New Mexico State was able to win. Because of this victory, New Mexico State ends up ranked number 34 in the AP poll. Auburn was unranked. So which team would be favored? The team that's ranked higher? No. It's still Auburn because they are rated as a much better team. And most people, I think, would understand that Auburn would probably win the rematch. So if they were to play 2 games, we would expect Auburn to win 9,801 times out of every 10,000 games, which would be a winning percentage of just over 98%. New Mexico State, on the other hand, we would only expect them to win twice, 1 out of every 10,000 games. That would be like a 0.01%, not 1%, 0.01%. And the probability that these two teams would split out of every 10,000 games, 198 times, both teams would win a game. And that would come out to about almost 2% of the time that you would get a split. How would this look if we modeled it? I have here a model of 10,000 little squares. Blue squares represents the probability of Auburn winning 2 games, both of them. The orange is if they split, and this one tiny little yellow square represents the probability that New Mexico State could win 2 games back-to-back against Auburn. Well, hopefully the video was helpful or at least interesting. We'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. If you're a middle school math teacher or student, consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, we'll see you on The Land of Math.